York, Canada, Kenya, and Washington, D.C. will be elaborating on the exciting adoption of the Pact for the Future and the recently concluded Summit of the Future, and our panelists will uncover multiple pillars of this promising global commitment, a multi-generational opportunity for a renewed vision of peace and development. Let's start with the introduction video.
Welcome to the 9th Annual SDGs Conference 2024, Panel 1, the Summit of the Future, Revitalizing the Pact for the Future. On the occasion of the UNGA 79, JWF and its 56 global partners from 30 countries gather in New York to explore the urgent need for revitalizing international collaboration in addressing contemporary challenges through multifaceted strategies. There is a growing consensus on the concept of UN 2.0, which highlights the necessity for reforms in multilateral diplomacy. Our goal? To strengthen the United Nations system, ensuring it becomes more efficient and responsive to the complex global issues we face today. Panel 1 emphasizes the critical importance of giving a voice to civil society in a global governance. By ensuring inclusive decision-making, we can foster a more equitable future for all. Innovation and emerging technologies are central to our discussions. We will explore both the opportunities these advancements offer and the challenges they present for sustainable development. And at the heart of our conversation is the empowerment of youth. Together, we will discuss how to build trust in youth-led organizations and the importance of increasing investment in initiatives aimed at empowering young people. Join us as we pave the way for a revitalized global governance framework that is inclusive, innovative, and responsive to the needs of our world. Together, we will shape the future. Let's embark on this journey together.
To lead the panel 1, I'm thrilled to have Jesselina Rana with us, the UN advisor of CIVICUS, an expert with a particular human rights advocacy know-how from Global South. At CIVICUS, Ms. Rana advises on global trends concerning civic space issues from a multilateral perspective and fosters civil society engagements at the international level. Jesselina Rana is also a graduate of Harvard's Law School. Jesselina, CIVICUS really comes to mind among the top organizations when we speak of civic engagement and civil society actions at the UN. And throughout this process leading us to the Summit of the Future, you have been leading the way with your distinguished organization through your policy inputs, ensuring that safe and inclusive space of civil society was ensured in this transitional period. So thank you so much in advance for your contributions today to the panel. So it's over to you.
And good morning to everyone. My name is Jesselina Rana. I am a human rights lawyer from Nepal, and I currently serve as the UN advisor for CIVICUS here in New York at our UN liaison office. CIVICUS is a global alliance of civil society organizations, and we're dedicated to protecting civic freedoms globally, and we are headquartered in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you firstly to the Journalists and Writers Foundation for having me here. And before we begin with our panel discussion, I know all of you are waiting to hear from our exemplary line of speakers here today, but just lead on CIVICUS and some of our reflections from the processes on the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future. CIVICUS, as some of you may know, one of our key initiatives is our annual participatory research publication called the CIVICUS Monitor, where we track civic ratings all across the world and in all countries, and analyze trends in civic freedoms worldwide. In 2023, our data revealed that only 2% of the global population live in countries classified as having open civic spaces. And unfortunately, this situation is not unknown to the UN. Civil society faces multiple multi-layered challenges at the UN, ranging from physical and digital access to meaningful participation. Yet, civil society has always been a vital force for change, playing a crucial role in developing and advocating for more inclusive, rights-based international policies at the UN, from the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to the Sustainable Development Goals. And time and again, civil society has championed commitments to inclusivity and accountability in international agreements. However, just as civic space is shrinking globally, access for civil society within the UN has regrettably been narrowing as well. Like many other organizations and like many of you here today, CIVICUS has viewed the process of engaging with the Pact for the Future with cautious optimism. And like many of you, we have also invested substantial time and effort in attempting to shape the summit's processes and outcomes. In our experience so far, we believe that the diplomatic negotiations on the Pact for the Future have been hampered by disagreements over language. Several forward-looking proposals from civil society have found little traction in the final pact adopted on Sunday. And we also regrettably saw the removal of language on human rights defenders. As you may have seen in the final version of the pact, after much advocacy, we now see language on civic space protection. Yet, very interestingly, the Global Digital Compact features a more watered-down version on the promotion of civic space online. As part of our recommendations, we also made 3 innovative suggestions to the pact, including a UN Parliamentary Assembly, a World Citizens Initiative, and a civil society envoy to better connect people's needs and aspirations to the UN. Unfortunately, they did not make it to the final pact. Having said that, we do see value in the Pact's acknowledgement of the human rights pillar as an equal, interlinked, and mutually reinforcing pillar of the UN. We also appreciate the request for the Secretary General to assess the need for adequate, predictable, increased, and sustainable funding and financing for UN human rights mechanisms, including the Office of the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, considering that currently the human rights pillar receives only about 5% of the regular budget. With that, I am very excited to delve into our first panel discussion. We have an exciting lineup of individuals with rich experience in local advocacy, policy making, and global governance. To give our audience an overview of how we will proceed, sorry, technical glitch. Just to give our audience an overview of how we will proceed, we will have 2 rounds. The first round will include a short introduction of each speaker along with their remarks. After each speaker, I will move on to the next with the introduction and remarks, and so on. Once all 4 speakers have provided their insights, we will transition into an interactive round where I will ask our speakers questions based on their remarks and unpack them further. If time permits, we will also open the floor to audience questions. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone was able to hear me. If not, please do let us know. We're happy to change the mic again. But having said that, I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker, Adjunct Professor Morten Kjær, affiliated Professor Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, served as its director in Sweden from 2015 until 2024. Prior to this role, he was the inaugural director of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights in Vienna. Additionally, Professor Kjær previously served as executive director of the Danish Institute for Human Rights and was a member of the UN Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination in 2002 to 2008. Thank you so much, Professor, for being here. And I would like to request your insights on amplifying reforms in multilateral diplomacy and strengthening the UN system. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Good to see you, and thanks a lot to JWF for the invitation and for the organization of this extraordinary event, and for these past years, insisting on the SDG agenda. As we have heard the previous days during the Summit of the Future and all the discussion, I mean, the world faces escalating challenges, from climate change, wars, authoritarianism, to hyper inequality. And of course, in this time of profound uncertainty, as we also heard from Professor Clayton, the need for a robust, reformed, and accountable UN has never been greater. We are at a crucial time which has been repeated time and again. And of course, in this context, the vision of a UN 2.0 emerges, a vision of a revitalized multilateral diplomacy. So what I will focus on are three issues. First, not surprising, human rights and what is the space of human rights, and then the structures, and finally on the inequality. The reforms that we are now going to discuss for the coming weeks, months, years have to be firmly anchored in human rights. Since the inception of the UN, it has played a pivotal role in establishing global norms around human rights. The adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 was a monumental achievement, making a universal commitment. And I actually think with the pact and with the enforced language of human rights in the pact, we have again underscored the universality of human rights. I think we have to leave behind us all the talk of particular tradition, religions, etc., that runs counter to human rights. Human rights are universal and they should penetrate all our actions. However, despite the critical role that human rights plays in fostering global peace and security, as we just heard from our distinguished moderator, only 4 to 5% of the UN budget is allocated to human rights. And as we all know, a budget is not only a line of figures, but it's also a moral document, documenting our values. Allocating 4% to human rights is not only a financial oversight, but an ethical failure. A more equitable budget that reflects the central role of human rights will enable the UN to better fulfill its mandate. Prioritizing human rights across all UN agencies and programs is essential to addressing the root causes of poverty, conflict, or inequality. And now I know many will say, but isn't that exactly what the UN is there to do? Isn't that what they do on everyday life? And I just have to say no. That is not what happens. It should be what happens. But for very many, if not most of the UN agencies, human rights is far distant. And right now, just these weeks and months, we see that the UN cuts the human rights advisors linked to the resident coordinators. That has been a very simple instrument to move the human rights issues at the local level through the UN agencies. And that is now, due to budget restraints, being cut. So it's high time, and it's definitely not there. Let's turn to the multilateral diplomacy. The structure of the UN, particularly the Security Council, reflects a post-World War II geopolitical reality, which definitely no longer aligns with the needs of our time. And that has been addressed extensively, and I think it's really unique that we, in the Pact for the Future, that issue is now addressed, and hopefully the discussion will move forward. In that discussion that will follow the adoption of the Pact, we should not only focus on the balances between countries and regions. Of course, yes, it is important, it is crucial, it needs to be recalibrated. But we need more, and civil society should call for more. We should call for systems that reflect much better the voices of more people, of the people on this earth. We saw for the action days and in the preparation of the Pact for the Future, how the youth had played in a unique manner. I walked in and out of UN doors for 40 years. I've never seen such an active engagement by youth before. But not only the engagement of the youth, but finally there were also someone in the other end that were actually listening. So there were voices and listening, and that is something new, very promising practice. Another avenue to bring more voices of people is recognizing that people actually live locally. More than half the world's population reside in cities. Cities are on the front line of the global challenges we face: climate change, migration, economic inequality. That was recognized for the first time in the SDGs, in SDG 11, emphasizing the importance of cities in creating inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable communities. Yet, the role of the cities in global governance is overlooked. So in the future UN, cities must be given a stronger voice. Mayors and city governments are increasingly innovating and addressing very complex challenges. Their involvement in international diplomacy can foster a much more practical, grassroots solution-oriented development as well as peace building. And they already collaborate in big networks such as the UCLG, 250,000 cities collaborating, C40, which is very well known, I guess. Human rights cities, I would say that's the fastest growing city movement in the world today. Cities in that way can be, in a way, the epicenter of dialogue. And as we know, dialogue creates trust. And I must say, it has been heartening to listening here the past few days to all the very good examples of very local level initiatives at the city level. So let's do much more of that. My final point is on the inequality. One of the greatest threats to human rights and democracy is the growing inequality, both between countries as well as inside countries. Hyper-economic inequality erodes the very social fabric of our society and deepens political instability and weakens the foundation of democratic governance. A reformed UN must place a global emphasis on reducing the economic inequality. This is not only an economic issue, it's a human rights and a democratic issue. So we need bold policy reforms aimed at redistributing wealth and opportunity. We need to focus on taxation, corruption, and a whole host of initiatives to create a higher level of equality. And in this equation, I really need to underscore that it's high time that the financial institutions such as IMF and the World Bank understands, finally take on board that all rights should be included, including economic and social rights. They have been profoundly ignored by these institutions. They are reluctant to address them, but they need to take them on board if we are to meet the SDGs as well as some of the issues raised in the Pact. It is extremely positive that we see in the Pact, I think it's commitment 53, that states will now look at developing a parallel or additional way of looking at the GNP. I think civil society should really jump on this one, push very hard for a human rights-based well-being economy for the future. So to sum up, the pertinent next steps are, first of all, strengthen the UN human rights institutions, both structurally as well as financially. Second, in the future UN institutions should be, in the future human rights or UN institutions should be based on human rights, inclusion and transparency. And finally, all efforts should aim at working towards a human rights-based well-being economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for so well articulating some of the issues that many of us are talking about in our own sort of spheres and really pulling together challenges in youth participation, but also some best practices that we are seeing, and we are seeing the change in narrative around that. So thank you so much. We will come back to you in the second round to unpack some of your suggestions and recommendations. But moving forward, I would now like to move on to my speaker on my right, Nudhara Yusuf. Nudhara is a research associate at the Global Governance, Justice and Security Program and the executive coordinator of the Global Governance Innovation Network at Stimson Center. Nudhara's previous roles include working with UNDP's SDG integration team and Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific, as well as with the World Federation of UN Associations. Currently, Nudhara serves as co-chair of the 2024 UN Civil Society Conference and is a fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Thank you, Nudhara, for being here. Just diving right into the question, given your role as the co-chair of the 2024 UN Civil Society Conference, could you share some of your reflections on unmuting civil society? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jesselina, and thank you to the Journalists and Writers Foundation for hosting us here today, for the kind invitation, and to sit amongst this brilliant panel. I will maybe take your question, Jesselina, and kind of frame it and come at it in three ways, providing first some reflections on the Summit of the Future process itself, pulling back then to the Nairobi conference and some of our thinking around what we hope we started there and what we hope civil society will continue to take forward. And then finally, maybe just sharing a bit of thinking on how some of us in civil society are starting to think about the what comes next of this fall, and hoping that that inspires some thought for those in the room too, all within 7 minutes, so I will do that as quickly as possible. So, look, on the 22nd of September, we saw a lot happen. We saw the statement from the Russian Federation on the amendment to the Pact for the Future. We then saw something that I personally believe was very powerful. We saw the Africa group speak up for the Pact. We saw them come forward and say, actually, what was created in 1945 is not the version of the United Nations we need. We need a future-oriented United Nations that also speaks to the regions of the future. The show of support that came from the Africa group, I think, was one of the most powerful things to come out of the Summit of the Future. Yes, the text is there. Yes, it's got lots of sort of Easter eggs hidden in it that I think civil society can unpack. There's enough there, I think, for us to take some things forward, but I agree that with both the previous speakers, a lot was taken out last minute. It is worth keeping in mind, though, that 163 countries agreed to the version where there were sort of more things in there. Those 163 countries are going to be powerful allies for us moving forward as civil society for this process. So, you know, happy to unpack that maybe in the discussion moving forward, which countries, what are the thought processes. But let me take off my kind of UN nerd hat and put on my civil society hat to go to this discussion about what we were doing at the Nairobi conference. So, 9th to 10th of May, we convened the Civil Society Conference in support of the Summit of the Future. It was the first civil society conference to take place in the Global South. It was the first civil society conference to open registration in the way that it did to stakeholders beyond just civil society. That was not an easy thing to justify, because traditionally, you know, when it comes to protection of civic space, there's a lot of aspects and angles to that. However, we truly felt that this had to go beyond what civil society's expectations of a process were, but actually how civil society can support and what it can offer to a process about revitalizing the United Nations. We were also very careful about ensuring that we didn't homogenize the voice of civil society. This is an important thing to kind of keep in mind, I think, when we're talking about the voice of civil society, is that is very, very different from very, very different people. And our perspectives of the future are also not the same, but they are collective, right? So we host the same collective future, but our versions of the future are different. And so going into the conference in Nairobi, this was one of the reasons why we kind of took out a statement at the end of the conference. We summarized the discussions that took place, but we actually came up with a slightly different outcome. So the conference itself, which I'll explain, the conference itself brought together some 3,000 people. 317 member state representatives were present, 22 UN entities were present. We had 70% of participants were from the African region, 58% women and 40% young people. So we were looking at a constituency that we don't usually see on 1st, 2nd and 3rd Avenue in New York. The outcome of the conference was some 23 impact coalitions. The idea was we could either be, it was May, negotiations were still happening, but we already had a couple revisions of the text of the Pact for the Future. We could either be late to inputting into the Pact, or we could be early to start the conversation on implementation. And we wanted to start the conversation on implementation. So these 23 impact coalitions, there's more now. There's some have wrapped up their work as a result of the Summit of the Future process. Some have integrated together, some have merged. You can see the details on the UN Civil Society Conference website. They brought together champion member states, civil society groups, in some places the private sector, because frankly you can't have a conversation on artificial intelligence without the private sector in the room. You're not actually affecting the regulation and best practices. Similarly with other international financial institutions, you need to have sort of the Bretton Woods institutions in the room, however flawed they may be, to have that conversation about reform and regulation. So the idea behind these impact coalitions is let's bring together these stakeholders focused on specific issue areas, whether it be financing for development, artificial intelligence governance, climate and earth governance, planetary boundaries, and really have them kind of lead the implementation discussion on the Pact. So timeline-wise, a lot of these impact coalitions that were launched in Nairobi were very active during the action days. They are also looking at the what comes next in terms of the Financing for Development Conference taking place in Spain, the AI Summit taking place in France, the Hamburg Sustainability Conference taking place next week on sustainable development and future generations. And so there's sort of lots of hooks going up to the World Social Summit at this time next year and beyond that I think we really need to be thinking about as civil society. So that sort of leads me to the last piece of what I wanted to come to in terms of what can we be doing as civil society to not only call to be unmuted but unmute ourselves in the process as well. And I should sort of take a side note to say that there's an unmute campaign that CIVICUS is a part of, and others in the room, Coalition for the UN We Need is also a part of it, that is doing incredible work on this, and I encourage you to look that up. But I think there's a few things, right? Firstly, as civil society, this pact is heavy. There's a lot in there. It also has the annexes, the Declaration on Future Generations, the Global Digital Compact, which I would argue adds digital rights to the mix as well in terms of rights of the future. As civil society, I think we can be unpacking what that looks like for member states, for champions, for private sectors, for other stakeholders who want to get involved and support, but don't speak UN, right? And so what are some of the key issues? What are some of the key actions? What are some of the key anchors and hooks that we can be working with? I think we then need to map out who our champions are from both the member state side of things, from other stakeholder side of things. We then need to pull together a timeline. What are our big milestones along the way, both from now to World Social Summit, but also looking at the Beyond 2030 agenda, right? So we've got very little time on the Sustainable Development Goals. What do the future of the Sustainable Development Goals themselves look like? I think we need to start mapping out those long timelines moving forward. Maybe just to conclude, there is a lot of energy that was generated as a result of the Summit of the Future process. A lot of connections that were made. I think what's going to be so critical is what we do with those energy and connections now, moving forward, to help land the pact, because we've only agreed on the action plan. We haven't actually done anything to actually.
Thank you so much, Nudhara, for that, and for really speaking on some of the practices that we saw, the good practices that we saw at the Nairobi conference, and we'll definitely come back to unpacking and sort of talking about what it means to unmute ourselves as well. Thank you. Moving on to my next speaker, Anil Wasif. Anil Wasif is a policy researcher and practitioner with extensive experience in both the government and non-profit sectors. He is the co-founder, trustee, and director of strategy at BacharLorai,
a non-profit organization dedicated to empowering Bangladeshis worldwide. Anil previously served as senior economist at the Office of the Budget, Ministry of Finance, and senior policy advisor to the Associate Deputy Minister of Ontario, and a senior fellow at Bangladeshi Canadian Community Services. Anil, thank you so much for being here. Given your leadership experience, what are some of the best practices of BacharLorai as a social impact agency led by young professionals that you have seen? I would request your insights on that. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, global partners, and the Journalists and Writers Foundation. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to all of us. My remarks today will focus on one thing only, and that is, how do we design organizations that empower young people to take charge of the things we need to do to achieve the goals we set at these high-level forums. As you've heard, I'm Anil Wasif, a citizen of the world who is in charge of strategy at BacharLorai. BacharLorai is a Bangla word that means strive to survive. Bangla is a language spoken by over 180 million people in Bangladesh and over 20 million members of the Bangladeshi diaspora worldwide. We, the people at BacharLorai, have a mandate to empower these communities across the globe in 3 ways: community building, research publications, and humanitarian work. Community building, which includes events like this one, aligns most strongly with sections 14, 4, and 15, which focus on building international cooperation, fostering youth participation, and creating partnerships. These sections are sections of the Pact of the Future. Policy research aligns with poverty reduction, gender equality, and humanitarian cooperations, which are sections 23, 24, and 57 of the Pact. Signature initiatives finds alignment with sections 15, 23, and 57, which focus on youth leadership, economic opportunities, and humanitarian aid. You will notice that by design, our organization is an advocate for the Pact of the Future. But after attending the summit this past weekend and subsequent meetings at the UNGA, and listening to my distinguished colleagues over the past half an hour, I've also realized that implementing the Pact starts today. Every single project that we launch under the 3 pillars I just talked about are also tied to specific SDGs and the sub-targets that come with them. This not only helps us promote the SDGs, but helps the entire team, including senior members of the board, learn about the SDGs and remember the SDGs in every aspect of our work. Today we're a team of 16 people working from Dhaka, Toronto, New York City, Washington, D.C., and London, United Kingdom. Over half the team identify themselves as women, and over 60% are Gen Z. But our work on diversity and inclusion continues every day. Very quickly, this past year, we have successfully delivered 36 youth-led projects, securing over $15,000 in financial support, and volunteering our own time to benefit 1,500 people in different corners of the world, many being Bangladeshis. The academic term for what we do is called digital social innovation. I have written a few articles with my colleagues on it, but to simplify it, what we call it is using technology, like our laptops, to transform youth passion into tangible action on the ground. I'm very happy to say we stand as the only nonprofit organization that actively engages citizens from around the world, just like all of you, to empower Bangladeshis globally, and not just empower them, but enable them to be self-sustainable. We have disrupted the traditional nonprofit space by hosting engaging social events that bridge the gap between having a good time and doing good in this world, channeling input we get from those events, grassroots inputs, into publishing thought-provoking research through our policy research pillar, and then launching humanitarian aid initiatives backed by the evidence produced by our policy research team. It's a simple strategy. but I invite all of you to replicate it. At BacharLorai, youth leadership is at the core of our identity, as the numbers speak. Every event we have hosted, including events we participate in, like the one hosted by JWF yesterday, has featured, or I might even say must feature, a young speaker that can showcase their ideas, initiatives, and solutions. And whether the speakers are on stage or whether it's the folks behind the scenes, every individual continuously should feel like they're contributing to real world change. But how do we do that? The first thing you have to do in all of your organizations is to ensure that young people get maximum visibility and their inputs, whether it's inputs to the United Nations or it's input through organizations like CIVICUS, are considered seriously. Thus, our talent strategy ensures that young professionals are not only equipped with the tools they need to lead, but they are also active participants in strategic planning for these high-level agendas. We seek input from every staff member on decision-making processes, and we even have full transparency, which, many seasoned organizational leaders might challenge me on this, but I actually think releasing your financial statements, making information accessible to young people actually gets them to see the bigger picture. Why are you sort of earmarking funds for a certain event? Why have you not used it for something else? We need to think about that seriously if we are actually serious about these commitments we're making at these high-level forums. These are some of the strategies that not only enable these young people to learn about processes that you need to know about when you build an organization, but it also educates them on prioritization and resource management. For next year, we're building a people-first strategic plan. This will include channeling input from our public-facing events, the ones we participate in, such as conferences, the passion of the young people at BacharLorai, and the opinions of leaders we meet on the streets of New York City and everywhere across the world. What this is actually doing is it's decentralizing power from my office, allowing each of our 9 program managers to deliver their projects in their ideas with their vision. And it also enables us as an organization to target funding from different revenue sources. Because I can guarantee you the number of sources I have in my mind when designing the strategies is far less than 9 people putting their heads together and thinking about how they can raise funding for their specific projects. So, these are some of the approaches we are using to empower our young leaders to be creative, to be innovative, and accountable for their results. We were born during a pandemic, and we were born as a hashtag, a social movement that was very effective because it just looped together a bunch of individual efforts, like the Me Too movement or the Black Lives Matter movement, and brought them together. But we very quickly realized to attract institutional funding, to gather international support, we need to, register, we need to figure out the bureaucracy part of it. And we realized that we need to figure out sustainability. So today we are focused on creating long-term impact through diversified funding streams, strategic partnerships with governments, nonprofits, and the private sector. And these partnerships are not only enhancing our reach, but they're allowing us to drive systemic change. To close, I want to reiterate that we're the only organization in the Bangladeshi space that channels insights from social events into a structured research agenda. And our ability to translate community input into actionable research that is accessible by young people allows us to not only engage them, but inform policies and decisions at a higher level. Nonprofits face unpredictable challenges as we see elections around the world, conflict around the world, and the sector's resilience has been tested many times. But like Greta said, just because we failed doesn't mean we stop. Whether it was navigating the complexities of the pandemic or adapting to shifting geopolitical landscapes in Bangladesh, we have continuously shown our ability to be agile, and that strength comes from the young members of our team. Today we're more than a nonprofit, we're faster than a charity, and sometimes cooler than a think tank. We're an agency for young leaders to take charge of their future, and we believe decentralizing power and giving power to the youth to do the things that they want will actually help us fill a glaring gap of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, we might be not even halfway there, but we were not halfway there with the ozone layer, and within 2 years we got our act together. I request all of you to believe in the power of youth to run your own organizations, and let's see what they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil, for really putting forward the youth perspective, but also making us realize to change our ideas and narratives from considering youth as leaders of tomorrow, rather acknowledging that youth are the leaders of today. So thank you so much for that. Moving on to my final speaker, but also I just want to take a moment to say that we do want to have a second round of discussion. So I'm going to request our final speaker, after which we will move on to our question and answer session for everyone. Valerie Nangidi Okumu is a lawyer and social science research consultant specializing in gender responsiveness and governance, law, politics, healthcare, and climate change. Currently, she is a research coordinator with the Pan-Africa Association of Judges of Environment, Land, and Labor, focusing on women's issues and addressing the intersection of feminism and governance. She advocates for peaceful leadership to resolve gender disparities. Valerie has served as the lead researcher at Kenya's Commission for the implementation of the Constitution and provides consulting on policy reform and devolution. Thank you so much, Valerie, for being here and for patiently being the final speaker. I would like to request your insights into unlocking women's leadership to implement the Pact for the Future, specifically regarding international peace and security. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to speak to this very important topic that would help us identify pathways that would get us to achieve the SDGs. And my argument is that we are going to have to do this through a purposeful approach. Why do I say this? I say this because in my background, I have worked in a constitutional reform space, and even the fact that historically we have had to deal with the issue of exclusion of women, we know that we have had a lot of legal frameworks, both at the international level and the local level, trying to ensure that women are included in governance and that the leadership that is provided by women has a voice to actually help us move forward. However, at this juncture, you can see that the topic that I have to deal with is still talking about unlocking women leadership, which means that there's a sense in which we haven't quite gotten to where we need to, despite the CEDAW, despite the Maputo Protocol, despite national legislation that have actively provided for the inclusion of women. So I worked in that sector, in the constitutional reform sector, and in my opinion, despite the myriad legal frameworks that seek to include women, I find that the space that provides for that, that most implementation of the governance reforms is rigidly grounded in law. And that through the enactment and interpretation of the law and enforcement of the law, we have moved forward, but we haven't quite gotten to where we want. Yet, we have to ensure that the SDG goals are achieved. So how do we go about this at this point, critical point, where we want to move to the next level of the implementation of the SDGs? In my view, therefore, the implementation could be misaligned if the values, norms, and mindsets or cultures which speak to a purposive approach in which governance reforms ought to be actualized is not really given the space that it's supposed to. In my view, I contend that unlocking women leadership is not just about inclusion, but rather it pertains to transforming systems to foster the justice, peace, and prosperity for all through a purposeful, ethically grounded, and skill-driven leadership, which women are known to have. However, with a patriotic undertone in the implementation space, there is a system and culture that has formed in which many things that are in the public interest are extracted from women for the common good, yet women are expected to only contribute without recognition and contribute in a free way, which requires pain and a lot of sacrifice from them, yet having made society survive through and thrive, they are not recognized and given the due space to actively engage. But all these contributions that come from women are only expected to serve as secondary to what is done. And most of the time in all the political space, you'll realize that there are always a stronger push towards what is said on the table than what is said outside the table. And yet we know that on the table, the numbers of women who are allowed to sit and speak on the table is a challenge not only in Africa, but globally. So the critical point that we are at now, we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to do? What do we need to change so that we can move and actually achieve all the set goals that are supposed to implement sustainable development? So the critical need to sustain development is that we have to secure the future, and we require a different approach of governance. And that is why I speak to purposeful leadership, which brings out the aspect of ethical values, which have to be lived through the know-how and inclusion of everyone in the community. And in that sense, I speak to the inclusion of women. This discussion has to be sustained by the conception of unlocking women leadership to implement the pact of the future. We can do this by questioning the patriarchal entrenchment in governance, which for the most part has repugnant values that have for a long time underprivileged and excluded women. These values do not speak to equality, justice, and fairness, among other issues. So that we are at a point where SDG number 5 on equality has had a challenge of realization. When we speak to issues of human dignity, we realize that human dignity has no gender. It's neither male, neither is it female. Thus, we have to deconstruct the challenges that have demeaned a section of humanity if we are to move forward. In Africa, where I come from, we speak to Ubuntu values. Where we speak of Ubuntu values in governance, we do not speak of male and female. The values espouse human equal treatment, collective values, value-driven governance, espousing the belief that I am because we are. In this sense, we have no option than to make sure that we include every segment of the society. Now, when we include every segment of the society, there are critical questions that are very simple that we need to ask ourselves, especially in this time where we have to be held accountable for what we do in terms of moving forward with the SDG goals. Why do we talk about the inclusion of women? Why women? The next other question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we bring women on board so that it's not only tokenistic, but it is a meaningful inclusion of women on the table so that we can be able to achieve that which they bring onto the table. So what is the agenda for the women on the table, especially as we talk about the pact for the future? As I speak about this as a feminist, I look at the legal and feminist approach, and which I concur can be at odds. And if we have seen through the political participation of women in Africa, where we have elaborate laws on women participation. Especially in my country, we have a 2/3 gender rule, which is actually anchored in the constitution. The rules have been implemented, but we have not yet provided the much needed space for women to meaningfully engage. In a sense, women are still excluded from leadership. So my question is, where we look for purposeful engagement, which needs to be validated, which need to be meaningful, and an engagement that can actually respond to the context on the ground. So that we are asking ourselves, when we speak about women and inclusion in governance, what exactly are we talking to? And this, for me, really speaks to so many other aspects that we need to purposefully consider. For example, in Africa, we have seen women attempt to go for the highest position of presidency, and yet there are so many obstacles that they have to contend with, not only at the local leadership, but even at the national leadership, and they rarely make it. However, we have seen one of very important politics play out in Africa, and that is in Tanzania, where we have ended up with female president. And the question is, how then was this achieved? And if you look at it, it more borders on how purposeful that initiative that brought her onto that space was than the legal framework. Because had she not been the deputy, the vice president, she would never have gotten to that position. So if we have to use the purposive approach, then we have to make decisions and act in a manner that is actually going to facilitate women to be able to get onto that leadership position that would allow them to go ahead and do what they need to do. Right now, we can see the other side of that coin, where we have Kamala trying to run for the presidency. She has proved herself right from when she was Attorney General, Senator, and then Vice President. And now she's out there and she has to defend her cause. She believes in the cause and she's out there and she feels like there's enough legal framework and the support that she needs to go for it. This is happening on this part of the world. How can we make sure that the same is the case even in Africa, so that we are not having different approaches to securing women leadership, not only in advanced countries, but also in developing nations. And that is why I insist that in developing nations, we have to be very, very purposeful in how we go about leadership, unlocking women leadership. Therefore, I also urge and argue that feminist judgment and approaches can be redemptive alternatives to the existing contradictions that block women leadership and present an obstacle in implementing women leadership, which then would challenge the pact of the future. We need to empower women And we've spoken about women empowerment. But then again, the next other question that we need to purposefully ask is, when we talk about women empowerment, what exactly are we talking? What is this concept of women empowerment? Whose power are we donating to the women? What and where do we put the women when we talk about empowering the women? Is it that they come onto the space without anything and therefore they have to have power donated to them? We need to deconstruct all these concepts that are tied to women leadership so that we know exactly if the concepts are really meaningful and purposeful in trying to present women in a manner that would allow for their leadership, or would continue to put them down so that they actually look as if we are doing them favors, or we are just providing them a space as a token to be on the table. I also look at the issue of gender responsiveness, and I look at the extent to which the norms and procedures address and accommodate the unique needs, vulnerabilities, and capabilities of women. I look at how this goes ahead to provide for collaboration, integration of women perspectives in policy making formulation, and to ensure equality outcomes in favor of women as we move on to the implementing the pact of the future. Gender equality, therefore, and female empowerment are core development objectives, and which are fundamental for the realization of women's rights, which rights are key to the effective, sustainable development outcomes that we are looking forward to delivering as we work on the pact for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak from a point of information that women are capable, women are nurturers, and therefore, if given a chance, women can move the governance of many other aspects that we are struggling with at this point in time to a different level. So we are we are talking at the right time and at the critical moment where there's need to make sure that within the time we have to implement the SDG, we are able to move along, and not only move along in a way that does not allow a segment of the society to effectively and meaningfully contribute their strength and their power and their leadership, but in a manner that really provides an opportunity for each and everyone to participate in a meaningful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Valerie, and thank you for shining light on some of the important considerations as feminists, and I hope we all do identify as feminists in this room, really do consider. And some of the things that you have brought forward are also things that we must understand that the pact has also been taking into consideration. One of the things you talked about was how do we see women's contribution how do we see contributions from women without value? How does the GDP sort of negate the care economy? How do we integrate a new sort of form of evaluating the gross domestic product, or new or parallel ways of looking at it by considering the time and value that a lot of women do provide through the care economy. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to come back to you. But before we do that, and just a note of consideration, our panelist Nudhara Yusuf had to move to another session. Apologies for that, but we still do have our three exciting panelists here. And given that we've started slightly late, we have an extended time of 15 minutes from the original time. So we do have that saved for the audience as well. So just giving you a heads up to please do have your questions ready. We're going to do a round of questions from my end and then move on to the panelists. So just moving to Professor, about some of the things that you talked about. One of the things that really stood out for me was in your initial remarks, you talked about how we need a future that is based on human rights, transparency, but you also said there is an urgent need to strengthen the UN. And when we sort of look at the broader context of what we are talking about today, about revitalizing the pact, about how we are moving forward and how we are implementing as we go forward, and I was in fact mentioning to Professor right before this session that this conversation has come at a very timely moment, especially since most of the conversations during the action days happened before the pact was adopted. So now that we are at a moment, at a critical juncture when the pact has been adopted only a few days ago, Professor, what do you see as some of the key challenges in implementing the pact for the future from a human rights perspective? And in your opinion, how can these challenges be addressed to ensure effective and equitable progress? Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I think what we really have to focus on, I mean, first of all, I mean, it's banal. I mean, the economy. I mean, come on, look at the budget of the UN. Look at the budget of what is within the UN allocated to human rights. If we take serious that UN is on 3 pillars, peace, development, and human rights, no peace without development, no development without human rights, etc. You know the sum, 4%. I mean, it's simply not serious. And we know that human rights is the glue of all this. That is what human rights is all about, is putting that person, that individual, that vulnerable group at the core of our actions. It guides us. It's sort of where we see there are some interesting instruments made by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, linking leave no one behind and a human rights-based approach. And what we see here is how the human rights-based approach is extremely instrumental in identifying the most vulnerable groups in whatever action the UN may take via WHO, via UNDP or whatever agency. And when I travel and discuss it with the human rights clusters in whatever countries and the resident coordinators, it does not happen. Some of them are very pleased now that after the reform in 2018, that the Office of the High Commissioner, where it is present, has moved further into the inner circle of discussions, helping them to identify when there is a tsunami. They still have to remind them that they're elderly, that they're persons with disabilities, that they're children that maybe should be catered for in particular. And it's not something that you do in the eye of the storm. So basically this, what I would say, the mainstreaming of human rights, or the further integration of human rights, is in my view of essence and understanding. And that is also why in my very opening remarks, I underscored again that, I mean, I've been involved in this for long, and we all remember how we talked about Asian values or African values, and it was always up against human rights in a way. And it was a way to sidetrack human rights. I think we have moved away from that. We have reached a new stage where, I would say globally, we recognize the universality of human rights. And that is a very first, I wouldn't say first, but a very important step to actually realize what I'm talking about here. So basically, I would say, of course, more funding. It's appalling what we see, and as I illustrated, I mean, one person, one human rights advisor to the resident coordinators, they are now being pulled back from I don't know how many country officers. And this is, so to say, the stage of the economy. Strengthen the economy and strengthen the human rights awareness. Then at least we can move somewhat, change the perspective.
Thank you so much, Professor. Without wasting any more time on my sort of remarks, I want to make sure that I give enough time to the speakers and to the audience. Valerie, moving to you. I would like to request your insights on, and I know you already expanded a lot on gender responsive policies, but also gender transformative policies, right? What do we see as the need of the hour when we're talking about implementation? And I'm really focusing on the implementation bit of it in my questions to all our speakers, because we've had so many conversations around the pact, but now that we are at the implementation stage, now that we have discussions moving forward, what do we see as the need of the hour from a gender perspective when we're talking about implementation of the pact for the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So when we are talking about the implementation of the pact for the future, I reiterate the fact that this has to be considered to be a context-specific approach. There's no generalized manner in which the pact will be implemented, and that is why I have given the varied circumstances when it comes to opportunities that women have to contend with when they are positioning themselves to take up leadership. So having said that, I then speak to the fact that when you look at the feminist approach, they speak to the issues of inclusivity, they speak to the issues of patriarchal undertones, and they actually seek to make sure that the patriarchal undertones do not discriminate against women at this point in time when we are moving on to the next level, especially when we have to contend with so many other governance issues that are not only local but global in nature. So whereas we intend to implement the pact and the provisions are clearly laid out and have been adopted by various national legislations, we have to also make sure that the prevailing values and norms are not repugnant to what is expected of the society, so that if we are to achieve the pact of the future as has been laid out, then we have to be very, very purposeful on what we do, and that for me is speaking to the context within which the issues that are being addressed are happening, especially if you look at the context in Africa. It's different from Europe and many other Asian countries and all that. So that the inclusivity and public participation of women really has to be addressed within the norms and values that can unlock the leadership of women as they bring forth their voices.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I think that's important for us to note, and just with that note, I want to move on to my third speaker in terms of, we're looking at a critical juncture, as I mentioned before, where local advocacy has tried to inform global policy in terms of the pact for the future. But now it is a moment where global policies now need to be translated into local action. And Anil, given your expertise and leadership with youth involvement, and congratulations for having 60% of Gen Z, I think that's a refreshing take on how organizations function. What specific challenges have you faced, or do you foresee facing when advancing these global commitments that have come from the pact at the local level? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for your remarks. I think we touched on a couple of important points. I think we've sort of established that, after fighting for every single comma in the Pact of the Future, we have agreed on something that works for all of us. When we think about implementation, we need to remember that the Pact was for all of us. What I mean by that is, we have to actually get folks in the decision-making rooms to ensure that they are aware of the context behind which the decisions are being taken. Youth around the world are disconnected. And this disconnect has to do with, things we are going to discuss throughout this conference: misinformation, disinformation, social media addiction, polarization. If we do not engage them, or if we do not engage them in the ways that they think they can be engaged, we have failed to communicate the importance of the Pact of the Future, and therefore we will fail implementing the Pact of the Future. That's point number one. But what will be helpful is sort of organizations that are helping bridge gaps between high level and action on the ground. I think conferences like this one, where a young person like me, joins a distinguished panel of speakers, helps inform my perspective in how I can lead other folks, but it also helps inform your perspectives in what kind of leadership we want in the next generation. Switching from sort of the softer actions we can take, there's also the concrete actions we can take. You'll notice, for youth in the world today, we are doing a day job. We are sort of the advocate for an organization we co-founded. We are the representative for another organization we're associated with. We have 24 hours in a day. And sometimes it's so hard to find our spaces in rooms like this. We are burning ourselves out by seeking more and more experiences to find that legitimacy to come and speak at the levels we want to speak at. I think we have to change the conversation on that approach. I think the UN, UNESCO, especially UN Youth Affairs, should actively work with universities and nonprofit organizations to create spaces where youth can actually contribute time, and that time translates back to either grade point averages in their education or proof of work experience that would be recognized by UN bodies. And that is a twofold approach, because while you are doing that, you get to engage these youth on the specific tenets of the Pact of the Future. You get to put them in front of the SDG media zones. So we have to be a little bit strategic about this. I have to say that as the director of strategy. But a lot of us also have responsibility towards our own organizations. When I go back, I'm not just going to do a PowerPoint presentation explaining the Pact of the Future to my team. The plan is to meet one-on-one with every single member of the team and understand which part of the Pact are they passionate about. That would not only teach them what the Pact of the Future is, but get them to start thinking about how to implement it. Thank you for having me here today. I think these conversations help young organizations learn a lot, and I hope also traditional institutional organizations can take back from the little I could share from my short career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil. We now move on to our audience panel discussion. Audience section, sorry. We have about 15 minutes. I'm happy to open up the question floor. If you're comfortable, please do introduce yourself and your organization, and also let us know who the question is directed to, or if it's a general question for the panel. I see some hands here. If we can perhaps have some microphones. I'm going to go with the first hand raised here, the gentleman in the blue.
Good afternoon.
Is it turned on?
I'm Rafil Olaore, the Executive Director of Youth Enterprise Development and Innovation Society in Nigeria. I love the initiative of Anil Wasif, and I want to give an extension that we have significant numbers of vulnerable youth. And then for youth to meet up for inclusivity, the youth need to have a meaningful job. They must be economically viable. That is why my organization entered into rural entrepreneurship. We have numbers of marginalized communities and underserved youth with high rate of unemployment. And then the word always mentioned digital divide. We want youth inclusion. And then most of these youth are not well engaged. They don't have jobs. So we try to encourage this in my organization by building the entrepreneurial attitude, by tapping the local talents in order to make them economically viable. We introduce digital literacy skills to advance the skills of these young people. So the digital divide is there. So that's what our organization is doing. I just want to extend on Wasif youth development that you need to be meaningfully engaged so that they'll be able to meet up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to head to the gentleman there.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Asama. I'm with the Peace Corps, Nigeria. Barrister Valerie, I really love the assertion you made, and actually, the empirical statistics you rendered. My question, though, is the disparity and the dynamics of the female inclusion governance. Do you see it as opportunity given and not well taken? Or do you see it as not well informed opportunity knowledge for the gender? What I mean is that, like you said, you made an example of contesting candidates for the election in America. I knew there was primary elections and all that. Participation was done by parties. For example, how many women in total participated in the election generally? That ended up that there's one woman contesting now. Are the women taking advantage of those countries and those policies that have been implemented in favor or in equality for the genders? There are countries I know that the policies are implemented, they are gazetted and chartered, and they are domesticated in a way that the women could take advantage of it. Are they taking the full advantage of these opportunities, or do they need proper information or some kind of encouragement to take advantage of where the opportunities are there? Opportunity can be given, or it's a choice also taken. Or maybe they didn't have the willpower to take the opportunities. This other question, unfortunately, I will just lay it down. It was for Nudhara, but possibly that will be recorded so she can get to hear this, or we can all hear it and talk and think about it. So the Global South conference that was done in Nairobi, she ended up by saying stuff like there was a proposed collective information gathering and prospects of ways forward. So the path for the future. So in implementation, I want us to be futuristic and be intentional about implementation of these policies or this information to be gathered. So she said it at the end that she would love that there will be a path, there will be steps and actions taken towards the implementation of the Nairobi conference. So what are we doing? Like, I want to be proactive. Are we going to take steps? Are there steps? What are their projection and their timing? What are we doing towards the implementation of that? Because I love the fact that the statistics showing that the youth, like Wasif said, they have been involved. That conference had a lot of the young people and the female gender well represented, and the other genders that we normally see. So I would have thought that there should be some clear steps in the implementation of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take two more questions. Maybe I see two here, but I also see one there. So just three of these questions, and then we could move on to speaker. Okay, 4.
Thank you. My name is Elias. I'm from Denmark, Dialogue Forum. Thank you. Thanks for the panelists for these insights. I have a question building up upon, we talked about UN 2.0, and well, we have seen in the recent years that the trust for these international, we've seen that the trust for these international organizations, they're eroding slowly. It's not just the UN, it's the EU. We're seeing that they can't prevent conflict, they can't stop conflict, there lacks transparency, there lacks accountability. And we talk about what the solutions are, and we have the pact now. My question is, as you have also seen during the UN General Assembly and also before the UN General Assembly, there have been discussions about what could be in the pact, and we still see these lines, these countries that can oppose certain aspects of the pact and general human rights instruments, what do you anticipate that the pact will have as an effect? Do you anticipate that it will make a major impact, a change, and can we look forward for a better future? Thank you.
Thank you. We have three more, just these three individuals, and then we'll go forward. So we'll come back to the second round. 1, 2.
1, 2, where?
Yes.
My question is to you. I work in public media and I work in religion and ethics in particular. And one thing we come across all the time when human rights are mentioned, human rights, is areas of the world which are chiefly Muslim actually, but it also happens among Hindus, who will say human rights originate in Christian doctrine and in humanist doctrine. And so in the same way we wouldn't have the Red Cross, we'd have the Red Crescent. Why would we have human rights and why would we accept them as universal? But I wonder if that's something you've dealt with or you can make some comment on if you don't know.
The gentleman in the red blazer, yes. And then we have one final gentleman at the back, yes.
Hello everyone, my name is John Paul Weya. I'm from Paris in France. I'm the president of the Youth of the World in Action, Jeunesse du Monde en Action. Since I'm attending the conference here in the United Nations, they are talking too much thing about the involvement and commitment of youth because they are the future of the world. But I want to ask a question because can I speak in French, please? I will be able, if there is some translation, I will be, okay?
No,
it's not possible? Okay. So I want to know. Now we are looking about a better future of youth to achieve the SDG. And too much people are afraid because we think it's only 5 years to the end of the promise. And too much of us are afraid. So all those propositions that we are making, all those good ideas that we are collecting during all those meetings, I want to know how the Foundation of Journalists can help us as leader of those youth to make sure that all those good propositions should attain their goal. Not only to keep it on a table, under the table. That's why we are here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And sir, at the back, one final question, requesting the audience members to kindly keep it crisp and short. We will come back to you in the second round.
Thank you very much. I'm the Director of UN Operations for Justice for All. We're a faith-based human rights organization that works on issues of protecting the human rights of religious minorities and putting an end to genocide when it starts in different parts of the world. My question is with regard to the education component that was, I think, our brother Anil raised and our sister did as well. And that is, do you envision or is there a way to find within the pact a means of mentoring? The fact of the matter is, over 2/3 in many parts of the world, especially the global south, are youth. They are the victims of what happens to the overall society, and they're being denied right or pathways to the future through education because there is no education system in place. Children in Gaza have been denied the right of education, 600,000 plus. The Rohingya children in Bangladesh are denied the right of education, and the list goes on. These are some of the areas that we work on. Is there a possibility of a mentoring process? And I'm here to talk about the youth, but I think we need to talk about intergenerational. Because the fact of the matter is, some man, usually a white man, with gray hair, is the person that's heading a lot of the institutions that you're talking about and at the tables that things need to be made in terms of decision. So is there a way to do mentoring of alternative pathways of education in order to allow the empowerment, because the education is a passport to the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much to audience members. I know we were supposed to have a second round of of questions. We've just been informed we need to cut it short, and I apologize. I know we've only had male members speak, and I really wanted to give you the floor as well, but I'm going to take it back to the panelists right now. First to Valerie. I know the first question came from Valerie, then perhaps to Professor Mortimer, and then to Anil. Thank you.
Let me start by thanking the person who asked this question, because it would be such an injustice to leave this forum without making that mind shift from what we consider to be leadership. As we are speaking to the pact for the future, I want us to move away from looking at leadership only as political leadership. For me, leadership happens in every aspect of life and in every level of life, and that is what we need to harness as we work on the SDGs. Leadership speaks to the mindset and to the behaviors that allow everyone to participate, that is collaborative, that is tolerant, and those values and norms that will allow for the common good, people working towards a common good, and everybody being allowed to bring that which they can. At your level, at that position, you're allowed and facilitated to voice your concern. That to me is leadership. And that is why we are moving away from thinking that when few people are gathered in a room, they are providing leadership in terms of the goals, the SDG goals. For us to have sustainable development goals achieved as we move forward, we must allow leadership to come from those voiceless persons of the society. We must allow the women in whatever capacity, even if they're not in New York today, to sit and provide leadership within their know-how. And that is why, in this regard, we'll be speaking about local know-how and local information feeding into the international level and know-how, because everyone has been allowed to participate at their level and inform the process and inform that which is going to collectively allow us to move forward with the SDGs.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Moving to Professor Morton for your final remarks.
Thank you very much. I think there are two questions that I would address. The first one is, will the Pact Act, does it have a future? I think if we go back in history and take, some of you may recall the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna in 1993, where the globe was together to discuss human rights. Where do we go? The Vienna Declaration and Plan of Action was a tremendous guiding tool for, I would say, the following 15, 20 years for action. Less so today, but a lot of it. That was where we got the Office of the High Commissioner. That was where we got National Human Rights Commissions. That's where we really seriously started implementing human rights at the local level, taking it from the law books to local communities. It was a guiding tool. I think the Pact has exactly the same sort of power. It's general, it's vision at the same time that is very practical. So it's tangible, we can move, we can each see ourselves in one or the other action doing something. But it takes that we all take ownership to it. That we actually, each time we make a speech, each time we write an article, each time we address someone, say, by the way, Pact of the Future, Pact for the Future, etc. So people get sick and tired of hearing it, but don't underestimate, people need to hear it time again. So yes, I do believe that the Pact of the Future does have an enormous potential, but it doesn't come by itself. We all need to push it. Then on the universality of human rights, I'm really serious when I talk about that. That is crucial, that move that has happened. I mean, a lot of us, if not all of us, have grown out of this appropriation by the global north of that these are Western values. They grew out, as you rightly said, out of Christianity. They grew out of the Enlightenment in France, etc. I say, where did that come from? That was an appropriation. That was a misinterpretation. If I go back, when I sort of make historical readings or speeches about human rights, I go back 2,500 years to Persepolis in Persia. with the Cyrus rules, where we have traces of gender equality and prohibition against slavery, protection of refugees, etc. And then we can go across continents, look at the religious text, look at the let's say more philosophical text in whatever culture, and you will see a very strong resonance of what is today and what was pulled together in a universal process in 1948 with the Universal Declaration. Hey, 1948 Universal Declaration, that was the winning Western powers and their sort of document. No, go back and read the negotiations. A lot of the Western powers said, come on, this document should not be universal. You cannot insist that people in our colonies actually should have these rights. Yes, we do insist. And it became so. My own country, Denmark, insisted when it was followed up in relation to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, they insisted that there should be an exemption from the prohibition against torture that should allow female circumcision. Hey, they insisted, that was sort of, not female circumcision, that's not true, but forced sterilization, that should be an exemption from the prohibition against torture. Luckily, a number of countries in the global south said, come on, that should not be so. And more historians are working with countries in the global south about showing, come on, this was your input, that was what you added to the Universal Declaration. It's your document as much as anyone else's document. And we sort of see now that there is slowly, see it in the Human Rights Council and elsewhere, there's slowly a different take up on human rights, taking a wider ownership to it. So let's really use this opportunity to leave behind the old perception of that human rights are based on Western values. It's also based on Christian and Western values, but it's also built on all the others. And a number of others. So I think that's really important, because that's the only way, so to say, a global organization like the UN can move forward, having human rights penetrating all its operations. So thank you very much. It's been a great talk. Thanks for the questions and comments, and I would look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time, but finally with Anil, briefly, if you could give your final remarks, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for the questions. Most of the questions are really focused on how do we meaningfully engage youth so that they're able to implement, help us implement the Pact of the Future. Not only that, how do we make them economically sustainable or economically viable in the process. Forwards, engage, train, promote, recognize. Engage, train, promote, recognize. Repeat. We have to form a continuous cycle of engaging the youth meaningfully through organizations like our organizations. We need to figure out the generation that's in the middle between many of us, right? For me, I need to figure out the generation that's coming before me, have meaningful conversations, get knowledge from that generation, and make sure I have the ability to pass that knowledge in the format that the generation after me will not only recognize but be engaged with. In terms of training, I think the United Nations need to urgently collaborate with universities. When we think about resources and access to youth, that is your focal point. It will always be your focal point. And not just focus on universities, focus on colleges, focus on rural schools, and try to meaningfully recognize what the youth are doing to not only promote the SDGs, but also promote the Pact. And on my final note, we had tried with the Millennium Development Goals, and we realized that we have to reiterate. So we did that and made them the Sustainable Development Goals. And now we're at a point where we're reiterating to switch it from the SDG agenda to the common agenda. So this reiteration will always happen, but how you engage us in that reiteration through panels like this one is very important, and making sure we involve in the universities so that they can use their research assistance budgets to empower these students to promote the Pact of the Future, I personally think will lead to meaningful, tangible change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for a wonderful and questions of the audience and myself, and really unpacking both the pact as well as the implementation stage as we move forward. And I hand over the mic to my colleague from JWF. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jesselina. That was a fantastic discussion. And the group was very active, full of questions as well, so I promise to address several from our audience in the next run. Before we close, now I kindly invite His Excellency Abdullahi Suley, the Executive Governor of Nasarawa State from Nigeria for his remarks. Please join us, His Excellency.
Thank you very much. I think first let me show my great appreciation for the organizers actually of this conference for inviting me to be part of this SDG conference. I sat down there quietly and listened to all the issues being discussed here. And to be honest with you, as a governor of a state, I have to tell you thank you very much for teaching us what is happening, around the world. I want to also tell you who I am so you can understand what I have gone through these kind of challenges. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the governor of one of the states called Nasarawa. Nasarawa has the largest proximity to the federal capital. If you are familiar with Virginia and Maryland, you can take any one of those. That's the way I am also, like just with Washington, D.C. Now, I went to school here in the States, went to Indiana State, but I ended up living in Texas, where I work as an engineer in the oil and gas sector. And I didn't return to Nigeria until the year 2000, when I now became the managing director of one of the companies. I'm just coming from another event called Unstoppable Africa. It's an event where there were a lot of discussions about investments in Africa and all the other issues that have just been discussed here. Eradicating poverty, women equality, youth empowerment, social media interference with development, infrastructural development, and what have you. Just similar to some of the issues that I discussed here, and that's what I've gone through throughout. I didn't join politics until 2018. And I joined actually because of some of these challenges, because I have attended as a CEO of some of the oil companies, both here and in Nigeria. I've had the opportunity to attend hunger many times. And at one point I said I was no longer going to attend hunger because we just come and talk and talk and talk, and then we won't go back, nothing happens. And I said, okay, I'm no longer going to attend. But I attended the hunger of 2019, this time as a governor. And I said, you know what, let it start with me. All these issues we hear about what is happening here, what is going on there, let it start with me, forget about blaming others. Let me see what can I do. We have gone back to see one of the questions that was asked is that you have to empower the youth. They are not employed. They have to be employed before they do that. Who is going to employ them? Most of the African nations don't have enough industries, don't have enough funding. And when you have a project that you are bringing outside Africa, first they tell you that it's not big enough, the portfolio is small. We are looking for a portfolio that is 1 billion or more. So we have to face ourselves. Nobody is going to develop some of these issues unless we develop it by ourselves. And that is the reason why I start from there to say that, all right, one of the greatest challenges in Nasarawa State is education. We did what we call the baseline to find out why are our primary school teachers not there? Why are they not qualified enough? Why are we having challenges in the various areas of the right curriculum to teach our pupils? Why are we having problems with the various areas, of our tertiary institutions? Why are our teachers, lecturers, and the rest constantly on protest, on strike, fighting the government? So I said, all right, this equality matter will begin now. Starting from our tertiary institutions, today in Nasarawa State, the Vice Chancellor of our state university for the first time is a woman. polytechnic for the first time is a woman. The head of service of the civil service in the state is a woman. And I can go on and on and on. With the primary school that is being driven, we have given that as a woman. Then we pick some of the key institutions. Because in truth, 70% of the population of Nigerians are youth. And I pick the various aspects of the future of the state and I say, let us give it to the youth. The youth is actually handling one aspect of our investment, one aspect of our SDG, one aspect of that, and then give it to them. And then we try it. And then we say a lot of people don't have employment because they are studying courses that are very difficult to get employment. So we say, all right, we are going to build skill acquisition centers, bring you a certificate that you have in economics, bring you a certificate in accountancy that you can get a job. We are going to teach you a skill, whether it is in electrical installation, in welding, in fabrication, and that's so that we can also give you an opportunity to become an employer and be able to employ other people. There are a lot of opportunities in Africa, in mining, in agriculture. And we say our youth should go into that. You know, go into agriculture. You must not be an accountant if there is no job for an accountant. We don't have the industries to say we are going to employ all these people. So I think we live in a different world here, and I actually lived here, than a different world that we live in those other countries. And we must be able to say that we understand what is happening in those countries and we are going to approach them from that direction. Unless we do that, we are not linking the two places. There is no way a certain country in Africa is going to be like Canada or like America, you know, or even like some other African countries. So it takes us to understand who we are and what it is that we need to do in order for us to meet up with that with our local challenges. This morning on Unstoppable Africa, one of our good friends, you know, was complaining about promotion of sports in Africa. How do you promote a sport in places like Somalia, where people are actually looking for what to eat? How do you promote entertainment in certain places where security is a challenge? How do you have to be able to understand the environment, what it needs to do, and see how we can relate them to what is here. But the world cannot all be the same. Today we are talking about by 2030 we are going to meet with these 17 SDG goals. I bet you it's going to be very difficult for some African countries in particular to meet even with 10 of those goals. Because it's not a reality for some of us. What people are looking for, one or two things to do, so we must speak as a panelist to be able to discuss some of these challenges, nation by nation, and say that we will be able to attract and solve certain issues for this. So if the SDGs goals are 17 for America, I will say for nationals, then give us 10. So that if we are able to meet the 10, then we know in reality we are going in the right direction. But there is no way we can meet 17. And I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing the number of goals. I'm just being very, very realistic in the issues. There are some communities that is very difficult to even accept. If I had appointed a vice chancellor, a woman, there are some states in Nigeria that will not even accept a deputy governor, a woman, because they know on the death of the governor, the deputy governor will be a governor. But there are some states that immediately will accept a woman as a governor, not even a deputy. You know, so these are the challenges. I just want to say that the environment is different, and so the challenges are different. Therefore, the solutions must also be different. I thank you very much for your time.